Hello, hello. Welcome to the first baggage claim stream. This is literally the first time that I've just run a proper stream. So I'm a little nervous, not gonna lie. But welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. The stream is going to be called Carry On. I have done 2 live streams before, just kind of off the cuff, randomly. But this is the first time that this is hopefully the first in a series of live streams that I would like to do. The name is going to be called Carry On. And this was a great idea from a friend of mine who said, why not have kind of a side podcast or live stream situation where you talk about topics that don't really make it into the main channel. So to kind of just explain what you guys can expect from this moving forward is that for the main channel, I'm going to continue to make these longer form videos as I've continued to do, but they're going to just change up a little bit. I think they're going to become a little bigger. They're going to become more serious topics, like more talking about general cultural issues that we're facing. And then Carry On is going to be the place where I talk about things as they're happening. So whether that's related to a TV show or something happening in the public domain that you guys are interested in, because I do get a lot of questions for topics like talk about Velma, right? A show that I didn't end up actually watching, but it just didn't have the right place on the main channel. So when you have questions like that, like you want me to review a particular new show, you want me to talk about the Prince Harry situation, you want me to talk about, Mindy Kaling, whatever, those can fit perfectly into a live stream like this. And it also gives me an avenue to talk to you all a lot more consistently than I have been in the past. I will say, being in front of the camera makes me really shy. So you guys can tell I'm a little nervous. It helps to have other people to talk to. So, but in this case, I'm just going to go it solo. And I'm hoping that the more I do this, the more I comfortable I can become with it. But also gives me an avenue to work on this, the ability to speak into a camera, which I still haven't mastered, honestly. You guys must be wondering, why would I start a YouTube channel if I am camera shy? But that's why I do voiceovers. I love voiceovers for that reason, because no one has to look at me while I'm filming. Literally, I record my videos in my closet because it gives me the best sound. But that's what happens back, behind the scenes a little bit. So, okay, so now you guys know about Carry On. And just a last admin thing, make sure to subscribe to my Carry On channel. It's called Baggage Claim Carry On. It's linked in the description. That's where the live streams are going to live. So if you can't catch these all the time, totally fine. That's where they're going to stream on the main channel, but they're going to live in its long form on this side channel. So make sure you're subscribed to that. And I'll also cut these streams up into, clips so that they're much easier to go through and ingest. I'm not a big fan of sitting through hours and hours of video. So I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible in case you guys are not interested in one topic, but you're interested in another. So that's how it's going to go. If this is going well and I'm able to deliver something good to you guys, I intend to do this on a weekly basis. So we'll see how that shakes out. Okay, so let's start with the topics that we're going to talk about today. There are 2 big things I want to talk about, and then I'll also answer questions. The first thing is we're going to talk about the Prince Harry case. In comments and DMs that I received, a lot of people said that they weren't aware that Prince Harry was involved in a case. So I'll explain everything around that and why it's kind of important to pay attention to. And then later on, we'll talk about Ted Lasso season 3, and I'm going to do a full review of that show. I have a lot to say about it, believe it or not. And then I'll answer super chats as well. So let's get started with the Prince Harry situation. Let me just set the context there. So Prince Harry has sued a newspaper group, a British newspaper group called Mirror. And he's currently, this week, he actually provided evidence as part of the court case. The reason he's suing them, he's suing along with a couple of other notable people and celebrities, including Hugh Grant, I believe is part of it, and maybe I think Elton John is part of it as well, but there are a couple of other people. But he's definitely the most notable person involved in this case. And he's the reason he's suing them is that he believes that he was hacked by that mirror group, by that newspaper group many times, and that they acquired information illegally about his personal life. So this week, he actually testified on behalf of his case, and there were some things that were really strange about it. First of all, on the first day that he was supposed to testify, he didn't even show up. Last minute, his lawyers notified the court that he couldn't make it because he was jet lagged. And so that right off the bat kind of rubbed everybody the wrong way, that, why does he expect to come and file a lawsuit and then he doesn't think that he needs to sort of behave like any normal person would and respect the court and respect the process. He did show up on the second day, and he, in his opening testimony, which what's really awkward about the UK court system compared to the American court system is that everything in the American court system is recorded, is filmed and broadcasted, so we can actually see what's happening. But the UK trial doesn't work. UK system doesn't work like that. We actually just get the transcript. So there are a lot of different news companies that have been doing recreations with Prince Harry actors, and you guys have to look this up because it looks so awkward just to watch some people like trying to emulate his voice and mannerisms. But that's how a lot of people have been ingesting this trial, is by watching these recreations. And during Prince Harry's opening statements, it was really interesting because he invoked Chelsea Davies' name more than 100 times. And whereas Meghan Markle was mentioned about 5 times. So it's really funny. If you don't know who Chelsea Davy is one of Prince Harry's ex-girlfriends. In fact, probably the most famous ex-girlfriend that never turned into his wife. People thought he was going to end up with her because they had a lot in common. She's British. They've dated for a long time. Many people believe that she's the love of his life, like the one who got away, because she ended up breaking up with him. So in his opening statements, he talks about how Chelsea Davy and his relationship with her was disrupted by the newspaper group. And a lot of people are starting to wonder if the reason that he's bringing up all these old memories regarding her is that maybe he's starting to wonder if he made a mistake with his choice in life partner. Now, why is this all relevant? I know I'm just talking about idle gossip here, but the reason I want to talk about this is because on the channel for a long time, we've talked about narcissism. And there's an important stage in a relationship with a narcissist where you start to wake up and realize the mistakes that you've made, and that you might be trying to sort of understand now how to get out of this relationship. And I think because of a lot of things happening, now this is just my speculation, a lot of the things happening indicate that Prince Harry is in that state where he's starting to wonder if he hasn't made a massive mistake by marrying Meghan Markle, and is now starting to kind of go over his past. This is something I've heard a lot of people talk about when they're severing their relationship with a narcissist, is that they start going over their past over and over. And this is something I did as well. So I started to really go back and start to think, where did my life go wrong? Where did my life go wrong? And one of the ways that you can recover from a relationship with a narcissist, aside from severing all ties with them, is you can start to acknowledge your hand in letting all this happen. That you invited this narcissist into your life and you invited them to completely break it apart. Now with Prince Harry, that's what's happened, right? He allowed all this to happen. He's completely severed ties with his family, with his friends, with his country of origin. He's, thousands of miles away, and then he's embroiled in all these different legal battles. This is not, by the way, the only lawsuit that he's embroiled in. There are a couple others as well. And I think what's happening is that Prince Harry's realizing he's made a mistake, but he does not want to take blame for it. This is a period of blame shifting, and he's trying to blame anybody and everybody. We saw that with Spare, right? With the book that he wrote. A lot of his focus was on trying to blame his brother, his father, the royal family. I mean, anyone and everyone possible. And even with this situation, with this lawsuit, I think he's one of his biggest emotional aspects of talking about this has been about how the involvement of the press led to Chelsea Davy leaving him. Now, that's a really awkward assessment of the situation, because the reason that Chelsea Davy actually left him is because it came out that he was going to strip clubs. And that was one of the massive fights that she had with him before she called it off. Now, this has all been vastly reported. It's not my speculation. It's been vastly reported. There were two major reasons that other people also cite, is that he was also prone to being very emotionally unstable. So it was hard to predict what mood he was going to be in. And that was another reason that Chelsea broke up with him. And lastly, it was because she saw that he was terribly, terribly paranoid, that he would see photographers behind bushes. He would assume that they were behind, around the corner, like everywhere possible. He would see phantoms of photographers. And she just couldn't handle that. Like, he was just always on edge. Understandable, it's hard to live in a fishbowl life like that. Fine. But what's interesting is that as part of this case, he's not kind of taking a look at himself and saying, well, maybe Chelsea left because of my own actions, and why am I going to strip clubs if I'm part of a long-term relationship with someone? It's more, his anger is that because the press found out that he went to a strip club, posted all about that, he being a public figure, at that time he was third in line for the British throne. Why would the press not report on something like that? That's such untoward behavior. Of course it would be reported on. But again, he's blaming the press for actions that he chose to take. And this is the stage that he's in. Oh, the Little Platoon's here. Hi, Little Platoon. I'm so glad you could join. I thought you might be over at FNT, watching those guys. But I'm glad you're here, listening to me talk about the Prince Harry situation. So the point is that Harry is starting to realize that things have gone wildly wrong in his life, but instead of taking stock of his own actions, he's still caught up in this desire to blame other people. Now, who should he be blaming if not himself and Meghan Markle, right? He's the one who has taken every decision that has brought him here. And I think also his resistance to blaming Meghan Markle is that there are so many people that have warned him. There are so many people that warned him about Meghan Markle. His family, his friends, not to mention his brother. The press warned him. Even Meghan Markle's family warned him about her. And he chose to ignore all of that and still go into this relationship. And there are a lot of reports showing that, they're leading more and more separate lives. And I do think that it's very likely that we'll see a divorce coming up, or at least a massive separation coming up. So the point of this whole conversation is that you really cannot recover from a relationship with a narcissist if you're not able to or willing to face up to the truth, which is, what did you do? What have you done that has allowed this to happen? And that is also the problem with this victim narrative obsession that's, taken over our entire world, is that it always feels easier to blame someone else. You could blame the patriarchy, you could blame racism, you could blame the society at large, you could blame the press, you could blame your family, you can blame everybody, except anything to avoid taking personal responsibility. And in life, the truth of the matter is that if you're in a really hard time, you're not going to get out of it without recognizing your own hand in it. And that I think is what we're seeing Prince Harry really grapple with in this situation. Now, aside from his personal strife in the situation, it's a bigger issue for the British media, what he's up to, because he has been gunning for the British media forever, and everything becomes about his it becomes about his vendetta against them. So he often cites the issues around his mother's death, that she was chased to her death. But again, that happened in Paris. That was the Paris media. But he never invokes their name. And same thing, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about what happened in New York when he and Meghan were in New York, and they were attending an award ceremony, and then there was a statement that came out from their representative saying that they had been involved in a near catastrophic chase that lasted more than 2 hours. And yet again, it became a vendetta against the media. But that's now the American media. But he always comes back to issues with the British media. And he has said it publicly that his desire is to change the state of news publications, of of what sort of rules they have to follow. And it comes down to and I think this involves Meghan Markle as well, it comes down to their desire to control the narrative, right? I think Harry is perfectly fine with violating his privacy and the privacy of his family. What he's not fine, and making money off of that, not to mention, but what he's not okay with is if someone else finds out anything about him. He doesn't want anything about him ever reported that's even mildly negative. He wants to do what Meghan Markle's always wanted to do, which is that only positive things should be talked about. Do not try to find out any aspect of the truth about me that I don't want out there. But that's not how things work. The whole idea of being a royal, or even a celebrity, is that you can't just have it your way. You have to take the good with the bad. You have all this privilege, you have all this money, you have all this attention. That comes with scrutiny as well. And that's an important aspect of society, is that you can't just have the positive. You're going to be challenged, and you need to be challenged. The press doesn't just exist to make people's lives harder. Yes, there's an aspect to it that's like sensational and tabloid that nobody really respects that, right? But there's an aspect to the press about uncovering the truth, finding out what's really going on. Is there corruption? Is there a problem? Is something negative happening? And that's what the press is there for. It's to challenge. But of course, he doesn't want that. So that's what's going on with Prince Harry currently. Let me see if there are any super chats in the meantime, because if you guys have any questions about this, drop them in there and I'll answer them. And if not, we will move on to the Ted Lasso Season 3 review. Okay. Here's the first super chat. Oh, damn the fates. The one day I'm off to watch live, I will be in hospital. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. This is totally simping and don't care. Your work is the bomb. Amazing. Thank you so much. Sorry you can't join, and hopefully you're not in hospital for anything serious, but I will publish the stream after and you can enjoy it then. Shenanigans says, always loved your on-camera videos. Hopefully this becomes a regular feature. Yes, hopefully. I think the more practice I get, the better I'll get at it, and we can make this a weekly thing. LCC sent a super sticker. Thank you. And Justin says, this is only because you're awesome. Thank you, Justin. And Simon says, thanks for all your videos. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for all the support. I will say the next video, I want to talk about that real quick, and then we'll talk about Ted Lasso. The next video I've been working on for a little while, the title of it is What the Hell is Going On? The whole reason for this video is I really want to address kind of where we've gone sideways culturally. There is a lot of division going on in our society today. There's been a lot of screaming and anger. And it's really important to talk about what exactly is going on and what do we do with what's happening. It's going to take a lot of different videos to really tackle this question because it is pretty big, and I've been working and reworking it for the last 5 weeks. And this morning, I kind of had a bad day because I finished the video last night and I showed it to my brother and I showed it to my sister-in-law and my husband, and they were like, it's good, but it's not great. And that's always hard to hear because I appreciate them saying that. I would rather they tell me than keep that from me. But after just like 5 weeks of working on this video, I'm just so sick of it and I just wanted to be done with it. So I was intending to get it out on Monday. So I'm going to be working on it all weekend, reworking it a little bit. Let's see if I can make it better. They assured me that the content is good. It is definitely very sensitive. I will say that. I'm talking a lot about the trans issues. I'm talking a lot about topics that we're not supposed to talk about, especially on YouTube. Sort of all this like identity politics stuff that's taken over our culture. So they assured me that the content is good, but that the way the video is organized, it's hard to follow and it doesn't land well. So gotta fix that. So I'm gonna work on it all weekend and hopefully I'll get it live to you guys by Monday morning. Okay. All right, let's talk about Ted Lasso. Okay, I'm going to warn you guys there are going to be spoilers, but I also don't think you guys should worry too much about spoilers because honestly, if you watched it, there's not much to spoil. And I don't want to just start with the negative, right? I want to talk about first, like why I really like the show. I really, really enjoyed season 1. Season 2, I enjoyed a little less, but I rewatched every episode and I went back and watched every episode again because it's a great show. The premise is really, really good. To have a character like Ted Lasso from the Midwest, a football coach moving out to England, to London, Richmond, and coaching a soccer team. I mean, that's such a great premise. And the fact that the owner of this soccer team is only hired him because she's trying to sabotage the team because of her ex-husband. It's the team that her ex-husband loves. So I thought that from the get-go, the show had great potential because it was offsetting such a positive man like Ted Lasso with all these negative characters, right? You have Roy Kent, who just yells all the time, and then you have Rebecca, who is out for revenge. She hates everyone. She's like angry with the world in general. She's angry with everybody around her. So she puts on this facade that, oh, I'm so happy you're here, but really she just wants to watch him fail. Then you have someone like Jamie, who is just so arrogant, and just thinks that the world is about him. So you have these great characters kind of clashing. And in that sense, season 1 worked really well because considering the fact that at the end of season 1, the team actually does fail. It goes into relegation, right? And it drops down a tier. It shows that it takes a long time to take a ship and turn it around, right? So as much as we like Ted and we like his right hand, Coach Beard, who I will talk about later, as much as we like them, it's not going to be an easy process to turn something around. And there are all these issues between different players. And I love how much season 1 and season 2 really got into that. Now, season 2 was really good because while season 1 talked about all this positive stuff about Ted's positivity, in season 2, they showed you the negative effects of overpositivity. And this is something I've talked about on different videos with the channel a lot, but that this societal love that we have for being positive has its drawbacks, because it can mean that you're masking real problems. You're hiding from real problems and you're masking them, because an overemphasis on positivity might mean that you're not willing to call out something that needs to be called out. And we see that with Ted, where he's starting to experience these panic attacks, right? He's sitting with all these burdens that he's not willing to let out. And because he's so caught up in that, he doesn't give Nate the attention that Nate needs. Now, Nate is such a great character because he starts off as this like meek, ball boy, and then it's very obvious that he knows what he's talking about, especially when it comes to soccer. And he gets elevated by Ted, who gives him a better position on the team. But at some point, Ted is now distracted and stops paying attention to him. And under that in that sort of new phase, he's starting to grow really resentful. Nate is starting to grow really resentful. And I thought season 2 was so great to see that starting to boil over, right? And it shows that, again, Ted is not willing to call it out. He sees that something is going on with Nate, but at no point does he pull Nate aside and say, hey, we got to talk about this. Like, what is going on with you? We need to talk. Even when he finds out that Nate is the one who betrayed him to the newspapers about his panic attack, he still doesn't go and talk to him. And Coach Beard keeps looking at him like, what's up with that? What's up with that? Why wouldn't you go and talk to him? And this is where that fallout, the final fallout that happens at the end of season 2, where on one side, they have a positive change where the team gets out of relegation. They get back into the league. So they have this massive success. But on the other side, Nate rips up the Believe poster and bails out of there and joins a rival team. And so I thought that was such a great way to end the second season, because now they were showing you how over positivity and Nate's negativity were going to go head to head in the next season. And that made me super excited for season 3. I wanted to see that showdown between the two sides, Nate versus Ted. And that is absolutely how they set it up. But that's not what season 3 was at all. At all. Right off the bat, Nate is doing super well. He doesn't really, there's not a lot that they show of what's going on with him and the team. They don't show him coaching a single session. They show him interacting with his colleagues a little bit. It's mostly about him interacting with Rupert, but they don't really show him talking to his teammate, any of his team members. They show him being rude a little bit, but then later on in the season, it just becomes about him, being infatuated with Jade and trying to get a date with Jade. But other than that, they don't really show what's going on with Nate. And when it comes to Ted, if you guys noticed in season 3, that most of the season's not even about Ted. It's a lot of like distraction is what season 3 really felt like. There's a lot about Keely, about Roy, and it's fine. Those are all interesting characters, but like the show is called Ted Lasso. And this should have been about his development, especially after how they left the end of season 2. This really should have been about how he was developing as a leader, as a father, coming to terms with all these things that he's tucked away. It should have really been about that. But instead, it felt like it just felt kind of empty. So now I'll give you examples of why I thought that. And I wrote the stuff down so I wouldn't forget. But let's start with the woke stuff, because this is what I've mentioned when I told you guys I would talk about this, is that Ted Lasso did go pretty woke. It's nothing egregious, but it was still very obvious. There were tiny hints to it, like in the first episode, Keely is talking to someone on the phone and you don't know who, and then she hangs up and she goes, fuck you, Joe Rogan. And it was just one of those throwaway lines. Like, they never mention it again, like why she decided to do that, why she decided to say that. But it's obviously, knowing everything going out in the world and why people get angry with Joe Rogan, it was pretty obvious, like they were making their feelings known about their antagonism towards him. And then there was the moment, which was, this was actually now more drawn out, where it was straight up a storyline. Um, it was about refugees. And I talked about this on the Little Platoons podcast, where the conversation, the situation that was playing out was that these refugees were declined entrance into the country. And it's Sam, who's one of the football players. He owns a restaurant, and his cook, his main head chef, is, obviously very vocal about these things. And she calls the responsible politician for that decision, she calls her a bitch. Excuse me. She calls her a bitch. And this is where it just really started to lose me. The show really started to lose me. I mean, every couple of minutes I was looking over at my husband, just rolling my eyes, because it was so, it's so on the nose. And this is like how far their concept of positivity over positivity actually goes, is that they're willing to be positive as long as you agree with them. And then the second you don't agree with them on a policy, now they actually go to fuck you or you're a bitch, right? There's no conversation, there's no adult conversation or discussion. It's actually immediately to playground insults, right? And that's actually very consistent with, I think, how the writers really think about things, about the world. And immigration is a very complex policy issue. It's not as simple as oh, we should just let everybody in, right? And if you don't decide to let every refugee or every immigrant into your country, then it's because you're a bitch. That's the only reason why. It couldn't possibly be that it has to do with security, or that it has to do with logistics, with systems within the country of how are we going to handle an influx of refugees, or how's the culture going to handle it if there's a sudden influx of a group of people from a totally opposing culture. There are all these complex things around it that, people who are touting that, because people who are touting that they're pro immigration and pro illegal immigration, so they never sit and think about that. And I'm an immigrant myself. I'm a legal immigrant. And whenever I talk about these issues, people are like, oh, you're anti-immigration, you're racist, or whatever, like, insult that they throw at me. And it's like, no, I'm for immigration that is legal, that you go through the proper process to get to this country. And this is an issue, massive issue, that's plaguing America. Our borders are very unsecure. It's a massive problem plaguing the United Kingdom. And everybody involved is trying to deal with it with as much empathy as possible, and just reading into that situation and saying, like, no, it's because you guys are assholes that you would not let a person into your country, is just it's so childish to view that. And that whole line of thinking continues in that show, along that, all the time. And that's just one of the examples of it, is around policy, right? And that's my issue with the writers, is that they're using this TV show as a method to grandstand and let everybody know how woke they are in their politics, right? Oh, we're for immigrants. Okay, how do we deal with it? How do we manage an influx of immigrants into the country, especially when there's a cost of living crisis happening in the United Kingdom? No answer to that, right? There's no thought around that. So that was one of the examples. The other issue around the woke stuff was that there was not a single proper man on that show in season 3. You can make the argument that maybe Ted Lasso was, but everybody else was all the rest of the men were behaving in ways that I just found just uncomfortable. So let me explain. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Andrew Clavin from the Daily Wire, but he sat down with the trigonometry guys recently, a couple of weeks ago, and it was a great podcast. If you haven't checked it out, you definitely should. It was one of those podcasts that within an hour, I felt like my brain was just really churning with all this incredible insight. But one of the things he pointed out is that if you watch a movie today, you will not see a woman. You will not see a real woman on the screen, because all the interpretations of these strong female characters, it's a version of womanhood that doesn't exist in real world, right? Maybe it does in like very few cases, but it's these masculinized women that don't exist. Like, I'm not like that. I don't know a single woman who's like any of the characters that are common in American movies. And with Ted Lasso, I felt the same about the opposite, where not a single one represented any man that I actually know in real life. Instead, they were very emasculated and they were behaving in ways that you would call very immature, right? So an example of this is like all the men are very teary, but not just like crying in the way that I typically see men cry. I mean, like crying like children. I don't even see women crying like that. Like, that's the type of emotion that all the men were having on the TV show. Jamie has this breakdown with Roy, and he's just like, just bawling and crying, and like is burying his head in Roy's chest, and it's obviously played up more for laughs, but this happens kind of all the time. When what was I thinking of? There's the Jamie situation. Okay, I'm blanking a little bit, but there was another situation where, oh yeah, when Jamie goes to visit his mom. When he goes to visit his mom, it is so freaking awkward. I don't know if you guys remember this scene, but I almost can't forget about it. Wish I could. He lies down on his mom, but like right in her bosom. And it just felt so awkward. Like, this is a grown man, and his mom has this like low cut, like tank top, and her breasts are just practically out. And he literally has his head on her breasts, and I've never seen a grown man like sit next to his mom like that. I've never seen that. It's just awkward. It's just weird. It's like MILF Manor nonsense. It's so weird. And then, like, to make it worse, his mom says to him, "You're like my sexy baby." Who talks to their son like that? I don't understand. Like, who says that to a grown man? "You're like my sexy baby." It was so creepy. And then Sam Obasanya, this is what I was trying to remember. Sam Obasanya, his father comes for a visit, and again, it's like he's sitting with his father, but he's like cuddled up with him into his chest. Again, I don't know a single man who does that. This is like the weird stuff is like, this is like little boy stuff, right? Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with little boys doing that. That's typical. You see little boys crying and hugging their mom and clinging to their parents and clinging to their like friends. That's common. And it is done. Someone just said it was attempting to play for laughs. Yeah, absolutely. It is. But it was done so much that there was no aspect of it that felt like it felt so unreal all the time. And it didn't even feel that funny. It just felt awkward and weird. Like, and definitely the part where Jamie's talking to his mom was not played for laughs. That was not meant for laughs at all. It was meant to be this heart-to-heart conversation but I don't understand why they needed to literally have him putting his head on her bosom. It's just so strange. It's really strange. And then it kind of continued with everything else. All the locker room talk was not what you would expect from men talking to each other. It just didn't feel like typical man talk. When they're all watching a movie, they're all crying because they were sitting and enjoying and watching Sleepless in Seattle. I don't know a single man who likes that movie. It's just, and it's fine. It's not a big deal. But the point is that it's yet another lens into how people feel, how the writers feel about something. And I think their perspective is that they see men as little boys. And there's a lot of references to that. So you can see that pattern kind of forming, where in one of the scenes, Rebecca is talking to a room full of men regarding, the future of the league, like soccer league. So they're all owners of different teams, and she's sitting at the table and talking to them, and she starts looking at them as little boys, and she starts talking to them. She starts talking down to them like they're little boys. And then the way they leave that scene is that the billionaire, I forget his name, the eccentric billionaire, I can't remember his name. He ends up throwing food at everybody because they tell him, no, we don't want to do what you want to do. So he throws food at everybody. And this is what I mean. It's this perspective is a very immature perspective on people and characters and men. And you can just see that kind of everywhere. So even if season 1 and season 2 were hinting at more sophisticated concepts, season 3 did its best to undo all of that and go into very playground insults, playground nonsense, right? And that's where it just started to really lose me, where I was just someone just said, I can't unsee the MILF Manor reference. I know it's it's very apt. If you guys haven't watched MILF Manor, it's probably best to spare yourselves. It's quite a disturbing show. We watch it. My friends and I watch it when on a Friday night when we have nothing else to do. Okay, so I have more to say about Ted Lasso. I hope you guys don't mind, but I have more to say about it. But that's where sort of that wokeness really got me, is that there was this very simplistic, immature view, and it kind of now helped me understand why the rest of the show wasn't landing, because the show was really trying to land some very poignant moments, and it just wasn't coming through. And my biggest problem with that was that so much of it was happening off screen. So important moments, instead of us seeing them, we were finding out about them after. So a good example of that is Nate quitting. Okay, no. The first big moment was Roy breaking up with Keely. That was hinted at the end of season 2, but we just kind of find out about it at the beginning of season 3. Okay, that's fine. Sometimes, you want to have things happen off screen, but that kind of kept happening. Like Nate quitting his team, that was a big moment because we see him talking to Rupert, something's gone wrong, and then we find out next episode that he's quit the team. And then this happens again where Ted decides that he wants to leave the team and move back to the States. And again, that happens off screen. And I just started wondering, I'm like, there are so many moments that could totally be cut out. Like ancillary moments that really don't matter, like scenes that are just getting dragged out. And that's some of these crying scenes, weird tantrum scenes, those all could have been cut out for the meat of the plot lines, which is what's happening to Nate, what's happening to Ted, what's happening between Roy and Keely, all these important things. And those are all happening off screen. And then when something actually happens on screen, it is so lacking. So a good example of that is when Nate comes back and he talks to Ted for the first time. He's looking up at the spot where the believe sign was, and that's the sign that he tore down, obviously. And then Ted finally comes up to him. They finally have a moment to talk. And yet again, it's kind of this empty conversation, like, oh, I should say sorry, no, you shouldn't, and I'm so sorry, and Nate's crying in his chest. Another instance of a man just sobbing into someone's chest. And it that could have been such an important moment of two people kind of seeing each other's value. It could have been a deep moment, it could have been interesting, and it was kind of empty. And this was happening with any sort of follow-up conversation, even with Rebecca talking to Ted about please don't leave. If you notice, Ted doesn't say anything in that conversation. It's a one-sided conversation. And that is one of the weird things that they did with Ted, where we don't find out too much about Ted. He doesn't have much dialogue. There was one episode where he wasn't even there. There was one episode where he was there, but he had like 2 lines the whole episode. I mean, this show, again, it's called Ted Lasso, and it was nothing. And then those moments where, okay, it is about him. His mom comes to visit, and he's angry with his mom, and we have no idea why he's angry. We have no idea. And then when he finally talks, he says, "Fuck you, mom." That's him talking to his mom. It's like, and then they have this conversation about how he's afraid to go back to his child, like go back and raise his child. And he says, "I'm afraid because my child is going to leave me. And that's why I'm so afraid to get close to him." Which just that didn't really make sense to me. Like, he loves his child. He is very close to his child. And he's always upset when his child is away from him. So it just didn't make sense. Like, it doesn't actually seem like he's creating this distance between himself and his child. But he says, I'm afraid that he's going to leave me. And his mom says to him, "In life, you lose. Sometimes you win. And sometimes you tie." And again, it's like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? It's one of those callbacks to him kind of coming to terms with how in football you can tie, in soccer you can tie, but in football you can't. And now, after seeing that conversation, I started to realize why exactly they were having a lot of these important scenes happening off camera. It's because the writers actually don't know how to write a good scene between two characters. That's why it feels so empty. To create good art when it comes to TV shows, movies, you have to have a deep understanding of people and their motivations. And this is where woke writers and activist writers really fall apart, because they don't have that. What they can feel is just what they feel. They can't perceive what the other side might think. And so much of good writing is about being able to think through the various aspects of humanity and give that a voice in a character, right? And not just do it in a way that's superficial, but do it in a way that's deep. That's what it takes. So it's obvious that the writers didn't really know how to do that, and that's why they're falling apart. And the biggest mistake they made that with was Coach Beard, because what made the show, I think, very interesting is especially in the beginning, is that Coach Beard was such an unknown entity. There was such a mystery about him, that he was this incredible lieutenant, very loyal to Ted, and covering all of his bases. So help covering all of his blind spots. And there was this, he didn't speak much, he didn't say much. So there was this feeling like, who the hell is he? But he's so competent. He gets the job done. He's so just willing to do whatever it takes. But at the same time, he has this like almost silent partnership with Ted. And then they started to like tell us a little too much about him. And it's like you're starting to break the character if you tell us too much, especially if it's not consistent with the rest of him, right? So they turned him into this source of jokes, like, oh, he has this relationship with a woman, and it's a very weird, a toxic relationship. But that could have still been interesting, but he still continued that. They continued that and kept unraveling. Oh, he's really into drugs, and he dresses really weird. Like he would pop out of buses, and he's like wearing weird outfits. Again, they could have played with that and kept up the mystery. Like we have no idea who this guy is, and just kept him like made him like the most interesting man in the world kind of concept. But they kept doing too much, giving away too much. And by season 3, they literally had him, in the kitchen in a thong where we can see his full butt. I was like, okay, it just ruins. I'm like, it's just so different from where the character started, and it just doesn't add anything. In fact, it just makes him literally the butt of all jokes. And then finally they tell us that, why is he so loyal to Ted? And it's because he had this drug addiction. I think he said he was like a heroin addict or something, crack addict. And that Ted gave him a second chance, even after he stole from Ted. And that's why he's so loyal to him. I feel like that whole revelation, that's great. That would have been great if we didn't know anything about Beard. If they kept him this enigmatic character that is, mysterious, and then they would have told us that would have been a much better reveal versus like the weird stuff they've been telling us about him for a long time. So then finding out that he was this heroin addict, it's like, okay, kind of lines up. So all in all, I was pretty disappointed because I was honestly like, my husband's actually in chat right now. I'm seeing some of his comments, but like he and I were like really enjoying this show, and we were so excited for the next season. But it's hard to make good work, and it's hard to take something that's a good premise and then turn it into like a really deep show and then land it properly. That's a really hard job, and unfortunately they failed at it, and that's too bad. So I said a lot about Ted Lasso, and I'm sure you guys wanted me to talk about something else. So if you have questions for me, just pop them in chat. But in the meantime, let me just go through another super chat real quick. Marilla says, it's amazing how media is filled with lukewarm sequels and failed season 2s, yet then Hollywood and the like can't seem to learn from their mistakes. I think, if you guys had joined earlier and seen me talking about the Prince Harry situation, I think it takes a lot of introspection to be able to see why you're making mistakes. And there's a quote, I think it's a Carl Jung quote or a Nietzsche quote that says, you can see the quality of a man by how much truth he can bear. And this is something that, the quote is incredible and incredibly true. And this is where my father has had a lot of impact on me, where he, no matter what, I can always tell him the truth. Nothing keeps him from hearing it. And that's something that he's really instilled in my brother and me, that can you face up to your insecurities? Can you face up to your inadequacies? And being able to do that is how you can learn from your mistakes. Because how else, if you can't see your mistake, how can you learn from it? And I think when you have a system like Hollywood that's overrun by people who are activists, who are really just interested in virtue signaling versus actually doing something good. They're just using their platforms to pretend to have done something good. That's the weird dichotomy that's overrun our culture, where reputation used to be only accessed by people, earned by people if you did something good. So if you were like, you wouldn't be called philanthropic if you proved to your society that you actually did the work. and help people. But now you can claim to be philanthropic by just putting it in your Instagram bio and pretending to do, go to the right events, pretending to, show up at the right places, right time, and then taking a photo of you maybe planting a tree or patting a dog or, kissing a baby. And then you could be out of there the next second. People have no idea, because so much of our existence has become about projecting online. So that system of getting praise for doing the right thing has become very easy to hack by just doing this virtue signaling. Like, I'm for immigration, I'm for illegal immigration, I'm for as us taking in as many refugees as possible. Okay, where are those refugees going to go? I don't know, and I don't need to give an answer to that. But I'll still have hundreds of thousands of people clapping, saying like, "Wow, you're so kind, you're so brave." And you see that. I'm sure a lot of you come across those things on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, where people will do like the bare minimum, and everybody's like, "You're so brave," So that's the weird reputation hack that everybody has been able to access now. And it's changed the way people behave day to day. It's changed the way people think about themselves, think about the world. And so it has bolstered activism and pretense to the utmost level. And then when those people gain positions in at Hollywood studios, then they feel like they can do whatever they want. They can keep making whatever project they want. They can say whatever they want. And then they don't need to learn any lesson from it, because everybody around them thinks the same way as they do. So there's no one to challenge them. So the only way that Hollywood is really going to change is not going to be from within. They're not going to learn their lesson. They're going to die. And that's the only way. And I don't mean the people. I mean the industry. Industry has to, and that's the great part about capitalism, right? Is that it doesn't reward poor behavior. If consumers want something, they'll go and buy it. If they don't, they won't. And that's exactly how people are responding, is that they're not willing to prop up anything that they don't agree with, right? Look what happened with Target after the whole situation where they introduced clothing to, that was effectively grooming kids. They've lost $14 billion last time I checked, because people refuse to go and support a company like that. And I think people are becoming wiser and wiser about using their money to vote and prevent this kind of proliferation. Okay, LLC says getting show endings to land right seems to be an impossible thing over the last 20 years. How I Met Your Mother, Lost, and Game of Thrones all disappointed me. Yes. Okay. So I did not watch Lost, but How I Met Your Mother was such a disappointing ending. So was Game of Thrones. I think Game of Thrones can easily be considered the most disappointing show ever. I started watching Game of Thrones from, I think, live from season 3. And then, so going through the process of watching the show every Sunday night, we had, my friends and I had this whole tradition going. We would make dinner and then watch the show, watch the episode. We were just so excited about it. Stay off our phones, avoid any spoilers, all of that. So going through that process and anticipating what's going to happen next, looking up theories, having all these discussions, it was such a great experience. I think it was such a unique experience that show invoked in everybody. But then to go through all that and then have the most disastrous season 8 that felt like a joke. That was a joke. That they thought that would land well when everything was underdeveloped. The dialogue was like written by a 10-year-old. All the all the great character arcs were abandoned, and Tyrion was suddenly an idiot. And then what they did to Daenerys was such a great character. They did not treat her with respect. That was an assassination. It was, they took everything that she believed in, and within 3 episodes they thought that we could accept her completely turning into the opposite. So best was Varys, who was literally considered one of the most intelligent characters on the show. He was called the Spider. He was such a schemer. And then he just walks up to John with like no subterfuge, like, "Hey, John, want to commit treason?" He's just saying it in front of everybody. It just proved how the two creators, David Benioff, D&D, I forget the other guy's name. It just proved how little talent they actually had. They were counting on the talent of all these other people. Which is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think recognizing what your talent is versus what someone else's is, and I think being an effective leader, it means you tap into the talent of others and burgeon it, right, and help it bloom, and then showcase it. Help other people showcase that talent. That's what it means to be a really good leader. And I think they showed just how bad they are at that. And I think they had their eyes on future projects instead of actually doing this one justice. So yeah. And this was one of the most egregious parts of that season, was that they left a Starbucks cup out in the open. How does that even happen? There's so many people working on it, and you guys all missed it. I feel like there's like infighting going on, problems going on in the last season, which can happen. So it was such a disappointment. And then John was just, every other line was, "I don't want it," or "You are my queen." And that was it. Those were the only lines he got. So, and then How I Met Your Mother, I'm not sure if a lot of you have seen that, but it was kind of similar, where the last season just went really sideways. They took the whole season to show us the wedding, everything leading up to Robin and Barney's wedding. And they get married, and in under 1 hour, after watching like, I don't know, 17 hours of them like leading up to the wedding, and then within 1 hour they're divorced, and within 1 hour Robin's now with Ted. Like, what the hell is that? I think they really miscalculated. They thought people would be excited about Ted and Robin getting back together, but that was a train that everybody was sick of by the end of the season, because they really did draw that out for the whole show, where will they, won't they, will they? And then finally it was like, okay, they won't. Fine. And Robin and Barney were a much better couple anyway. And still, they brought it, they destroyed their marriage and brought it back to Ted. It's like, and killed the mother. Like, we waited 9 seasons to meet this woman, and she was a great character, so well executed. It's very hard to do that, because everybody's sitting and anticipating for 9 years, who's this woman going to be? Who's she going to be? Who's she going to be? And finally, she's a great character. Killed her off. Under an hour. Done. Dead. Gone. It's like, and mysterious disease. That was the best part. It's like very Indian, an Indian way of doing that. It's like, oh, she's dying of a mysterious disease. And someone said, yeah, people wanted Barney and Robin to be together. Yeah, they were a great couple. And they sold us. The creators really sold us on that couple. They had so much chemistry. They did such a great job of that. Like, even like little moments where one is interested in the other is interested in the other. It was just so beautifully done. They should have kept them together and let Ted be with his mom. not his mom. I'm sorry. Back to MILF Manor nonsense. No, let Ted be with Tracy. Tracy, I think that's her name. Okay. Enough edible stuff for today. Okay. I think this is a good place for me to stop. But thank you all so much for joining. I don't want to make these live streams terribly long. I want to keep them around the 1 hour to 2 hour marks. If there's something a lot to talk about, I'll definitely do 2 hour streams. But I hope you all enjoyed this. And will join me for the next one. I'll find a better time. I know FNT is around the same time, so I'll find a better time. But thank you so much for joining. I really, really appreciate you guys. And please look out for the new video coming up, which is hopefully going to go live on Monday, if not latest Tuesday. It's called What the Hell is Going On? And I hope you guys enjoy that. Don't forget, also lastly, to subscribe to the Baggage Claim Carry On channel, because that's where this live stream is going to go. So thank you again, and I'll see you next time.